This is Keys to the Shop, episode 133, 5 Keys to Successful Wholesale, with Sarah Richmond. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFurio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to share this time with you because we have such a great episode. The conversation I had today with Sarah Richmond is just full of great insights about wholesale and the 5 key things that you need to have a winning wholesale program. But it's also filled with a ton of great advice about leadership and mission and just serving people well. I'm really excited to share this with you because I got so much out of this conversation. I know you are as well. Keys to the Shop is made possible by our fantastic sponsors, and I want to take time to thank them today, starting with Prima Coffee. Now, Prima Coffee is a leading specialty coffee equipment supplier, and they curate the best equipment from around the world, and they fit it perfectly with the needs of both their enthusiast and their professional customers. So if you need something for your home bar, they have it. If you're opening a coffee shop or you're opening a second shop or multiple shops, they can help you with any of the commercial equipment that you need to succeed in your store. And helping you succeed in making great coffee in both venues is basically what drives them. So if you're looking for the best equipment and expert assistance to go along with it, look no further than prima-coffee.com. Go to the website, reach out to them, email them, call them, let them know the Keys to the Shop sent you. Big thanks to Prima Coffee for your support of Keys to the Shop. Now, this episode is also brought to you by Pacific Foods. They are the great people behind the Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages, which are designed specifically for professional baristas and the standards for excellence that they demand. So if you're making a latte, you could use almond, soy, coconut, rice, or oat milk. It doesn't matter. The Barista Series has the ability to take the heat from steaming, produce an unmatched silky texture, and keep the flavor balance of your beverage focused on the coffee. And that makes it a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. Pacific is a huge supporter of the specialty coffee industry and the barista community. Products like this are just evidence of that fact. So I would encourage you to go to pacificfoods.com and learn more about the Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages and find out what they can do to help elevate the non-dairy offerings in your cafe. Thank you very much, Pacific, for your support of Keys to the Shop. All right, so we're going to be diving into wholesale. When you are a retailer and you start roasting, eventually you're going to get around to that point where you start offering your beans to other people. And at that point, there is a whole world that opens up to you, a whole world of possibilities, but there's also a lot of complexities that go along with it. There are a lot of systems that you have to have for organizing both your people and your customers and managing the needs of those two fronts, as well as your own business's needs. And we cover these things and a ton more in this episode with Sarah Richmond. She gives us 5 key things that we need to succeed in wholesale coffee. There is a lot riding on the quality of your wholesale program, not the least of which is your reputation, but also the success of specialty coffee itself. As you gain customers and you teach people coffee for the first time in a lot of cases. And it's just an amazing thing. Wholesale is such a vital part of the coffee retail ecosystem. And that is why I'm so excited to bring you this interview with Sarah Richmond, because she is the perfect person for the job. Ever since the beginning of her career in coffee back in 2005, Sarah dove into roles of operations and management surrounding coffee roasting and wholesale. Among her many great accomplishments and experiences in the industry, Sarah spent time as a managing partner for local 123 Cafe in Berkeley. She is also the senior account manager for Mountain Air Roasters in Asheville, North Carolina, director of wholesale for Quill's Coffee in Louisville, as well as the director of operations for the Bay Area co-roasting space in Berkeley, and most recently was the director of wholesale for Equator Coffees in San Rafael, California. Sarah has published multiple articles around business and roasting and is also an editorial advisory board member with Barista Magazine. So suffice it to say that Sarah not only has a world of experience to draw from, but also a world of wisdom to share with us. And she shares much of that in today's discussion. And throughout the talk, we are going to be discussing a lot about leadership and integrity and the kind of things that you can apply pretty much anywhere in coffee. So in two fronts, you're going to get a ton of benefit. Some real practical step one, step two type things for setting up a great wholesale program, and some really great inspirational wisdom from Sarah on how to be as a professional in the industry, including in the roles of leading wholesale. So get ready to learn a lot. I know I certainly did, and it was such an honor to have Sarah on the show. So here now is my conversation all about wholesale coffee with Sarah Richmond. Sarah, welcome to Keys to the Shop. So happy to have you with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor and a privilege to be on the show. So thank you.
My pleasure. And we were just talking a little bit before recording about how this is your first podcast guest experience, but you're no stranger to listening to a lot of leadership podcasts. So this is kind of cool. What are some of your favorite leadership podcasts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for a lot of us who spend several hours on the road, podcasts are one way to get through it. One of my favorites is Adam Hawk's Learning Leader podcast. If you haven't heard of it, I definitely recommend checking it out. And there's a lot of podcasts that I listen to that have absolutely nothing to do with coffee, but are more focused on other people's stories and entrepreneurial pathways forward. How It's Made is another great podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you can learn a lot from people sharing what went wrong and how they overcome their obstacles, pursuing their dreams. So, yeah, I was just sharing that I spend quite a bit of hours on the road driving to and from my office and out and about with clients. And so, got to make the most of your time for sure.
Yeah, I think somebody I listened to, Brian Tracy, one of the classic time management leadership guys from the old school, called it Automobile University or something like that.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. I love it.
Well, I'm happy to have you on the show here, and we're going to get to talk about a lot of great stuff. So I'm excited. And I mean, you've been in coffee since I think it's 2005, right?
Yeah. It's been a while now.
How did you, let's hear the origin story, your origin story, and how you decided that coffee was the path for you. And you just kind of, there's a point at which we all kind of stick with it and we decide this is actually going to be a career for me. So bring us into that story a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I think similar to so many others in coffee, I'd like to think that specialty coffee actually found me. I was a recent college graduate interested in hospitality industry. And I thought working in a cafe would be a great place to begin. I was really fortunate to spend my first 5 years in specialty coffee working for a local micro roaster in the town where I lived. And I think without a doubt, my colleagues and community were two of the main reasons I stayed in coffee longer than I had anticipated. It's really, I think, where I learned to be my authentic self as a young adult in the world. It's also where I met my wife and my kids. And it's where, for me, I was able to experience sort of that endless road of hospitality firsthand every day. I think also being like a fairly methodical person moving from retail to management to roasting to wholesale felt like a natural progression and an exciting path forward. And I was able to do that in the same location, which I know isn't always the case for people, but I really was super fortunate to kind of navigate a career in the industry all under one roof.
So the same company?
Yeah, the same company for 5 years. So I stayed a lot longer than I intended, but really, I think what kept me, like so many other people that find themselves, behind a bar working as a barista as a transition position, they fall in love with the culture and the product itself and want to know more. And because I'm a super curious person, I just kept asking a lot of questions and wanting to know how to be a better barista and how to develop my palate and sort of hone in on some of those creative skill sets and really kind of continue that passion that I first caught wind of when I tried, my first natural coffee or my first Ethiopian coffee. It was such a creative process for me. And so I was able to stay in it and find a path forward.
And from that one place, you kind of continued in that role of roasting and then wholesale, or are you doing wholesale in that role as well, in that company?
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of wholesale as well. We, the gift of kind of starting at a newer company was that I got to grow alongside it. And so we were kind of getting our feet wet in wholesale and learning a lot from our mistakes. But it really was sort of a great hybrid type role that I could fill roasting. I was also managing our retail operations. So it really broke up the week to kind of get some experience, inside the company and then also externally out in the world.
Wow, that sounds like an intense schedule to be doing all those things at once.
Yeah, I don't know if it was quite sustainable, but I do have to say that it was a good balance for me. I think too, so many of us can relate to getting stuck in retail. I think one of the things that's become clear to me, working in the specialty coffee industry, is that it's a fairly wide industry, meaning there are a lot of opportunities to move forward in retail management. But at the time when I started, it wasn't very high yet. And so noticing that some of my predecessors were feeling stuck and many people leaving the industry for better opportunities that would give them, the experience they needed, I sort of tried to expose myself to ways where I wasn't feeling stuck. And so that usually meant showing an interest and a passion and a commitment often beyond what my normal responsibilities were, to learn how to roast or to learn how to go out and talk about coffee in a way, sometimes to total strangers from a sales standpoint. So it was a really great sort of mix for a while for me that really kind of let me understand sort of the bigger picture from an operations standpoint.
So all that sounds like a pretty fertile learning ground for a young professional. And you mentioned the mistakes that were made and the challenges of kind of growing with this business. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the challenges that have shaped you the most in your roles in the industry. Because after you left here, you went to some pretty high-profile roles, and you learned a lot in the course of your career. I wonder if you could kind of expound on challenges and mistakes and kind of how you overcame those and what you learned from them.
Yeah, sure. It's such a good question. I think that if it comes down to one answer, it's definitely the relationship dynamics for sure. I think I've learned that people skills are about 90% of almost every job. And we're all going to most likely work with people who aren't like us and who see the world differently than we do. I think I've learned over the years the importance of regularly finding new horizons for effective communication, and learning how to really listen to other people. I think, most anybody can start a business, but not many people know how to grow a company successfully and sustainably. I've, had the benefit of working for all kinds of people, some who role modeled how to do this really well, and others who showed me what not to do based on their unfortunate missteps. I think really, though, my biggest challenges have generally come from personal growth opportunities, like learning how to find a work-life balance, knowing when to move on from a job in order to gain the kind of experience I needed to take my career to the next level. I think, really the mistakes made for example, in wholesale, and I know we'll kind of dive into that a little deeper. They really, I think, reflect how much you understand why you're doing what you're doing, or you don't understand that. And a lot of what we do in our industry seems kind of reactive, right? We're having to respond to a lot that goes around us. And the more I think I've learned, the more closely connected we are to understanding what our mission is and what's most important. I think the fewer bumps in the road ahead in the future. So, but like so many of us who kind of grew up in specialty coffee, I think a lot of those challenges really were more internal and learning how to be, a kind, caring young adult in the world. And developing those relationship skills and communication dynamics, all of that. So I'd have to say really the relationship piece is the biggest.
It sounds like it's the most rewarding as well.
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
And it's unique to be in that position as somebody responsible for relationships remotely. And you're not necessarily working side by side with people in these wholesale roles. I mean, you kind of spent a lot of time in, I would say, pretty solitary roles of roasting, which of course is pretty solitary. And then wholesale, which is, chunked out. So there's a beginning and the end to your visit, right? And
yep.
But for you, it sounds like not only was it a challenge, but that you sort of could look back on that as one of the highlights of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really insightful to hear you say it, because I think when you're experiencing it and you're an inch close to your own life, it's that perspective can be a little bit muddy. But absolutely, I think that, whether you're in wholesale or operations or roasting, it can be a little bit like you are on an island. But I think for me, really what it allowed me to do was connect more intimately with the people on my team and the people I worked with, as well as, those that were wholesale partners. So I think it really has been kind of a great platform to develop both personally and professionally.
You've been able to make a big impact on the industry as a result. I mean, your positions allowed you to teach other people how to, not only extract coffee, but also to extract, good customer experiences from situations in their cafes, like how to handle the coffee you're selling them. But also, you're more than that. You're more than just a salesperson. You're a representative of a culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I've learned really from some wonderful industry leaders, and I have to say it's something I'm particularly grateful for. And specifically, I think the men in my life that have made me feel empowered and have acknowledged my capabilities and treated me fairly and equally to my male peers.
Yes.
I know that not many women can say the same, which is disheartening and unfortunate. I think as a bonus mom to two incredible young men, I believe equality for women really does start with our young boys. And my wife and I work really hard to teach our guys about the world and how to understand their privilege and why we choose to be kind to everybody. Really, it's the greatest privilege I've ever known, becoming a parent, but I've also really had some amazing mentors, guys in my life that I still, connect with and talk to and workshop ideas and try and, find solutions to, challenging relationship, navigating relationships in the workplace, but also creating a sustainable infrastructure, all of that. So I feel super fortunate to have such amazing guys in my life that showed up and really saw who I was and empowered me along the way.
Yeah, amen to that. One of our episodes in the past has been about the use of power, and when you have power, and whether it's assumed power or whatever type it happens to be, using that for the benefit of those that you're serving and those that don't have it. It's a responsibility. It's not to be hoarded. So that's really awesome to hear. And it's also a challenge to those of us to hear it, to continue that. So thank you for sharing that. And your ability to navigate relationships, I'm glad you're really hitting on that, because a lot of, admittedly, this podcast does want to talk about, and we will, about, actionable, step 1, step 2, step 3. People, though, are not like that. People are not like coffee in a sense. So it can get a little messy. So it's awesome that's kind of the cornerstone of all these years in coffee, and saying like, this is the piece that's like the most precious.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I love what you said just about sort of that privilege of being in a position to make decisions, and some of those big decisions. It comes back to me for so many reasons, understanding that leadership really is a servant position. And the more that you can use that power to help raise all boats and to help others move forward, and, personally and professionally, I think the more successful an organization is.
Yeah. That's absolutely, I can attest to that, having experienced so many organizations over the years, and that does seem to be the common denominator. And, when we're talking about developing wholesale programs and working in wholesale, that in itself is an empowering position, because so many people come to you as a wholesale rep and think, you are going to have the answers to my questions about, what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, because I'm new to the industry. And so if you're roasting your own coffee for your own shop, that's one thing, but to start doing it for other people is not only just like selling them beans, you're also kind of signing up to help them succeed.
Yeah, I think, it's been interesting to watch the industry evolve over the last 15 years, and especially I think how wholesale in general has changed. I think a lot of our wholesale partners are demanding more, and they need more support. And so, it's really, I think, super important to understand some basics before you get your feet wet. And it's a total privilege to start roasting for another organization or business. And I've watched some people do it really, really well, and some others just kind of stumble but find their feet, and I think, for as dynamic as human to human sales, and I like to call it human to human sales based on a book that I actually read last year called Never Lose a Customer Again by Joey Coleman. It's a fantastic read. But it's really kind of adopting this understanding that it's human to human sales, whether it's, wholesale or whether it's to your own customers. So yeah, there's a lot to take in. But I think the more preparation you can put forward in the beginning, I think the easier it's going to be in the long term.
Well, speaking of preparation, when we're talking about starting a wholesale program, there's just a lot of question marks. And given your vast experience in this area, I wonder if we can just kind of start to dive into outlining what that looks like to start a good wholesale program. Like what would be, I'm starting to roast, now I want to roast for others. What are the first steps that I need to take to go down that path that will set me up for success?
Yeah, sure. I kind of put together 5 basic steps, really sort of with the foundation of experience, but also some good advice from people in the industry, and also based on some great books that I've read. So I would say before taking that next leap into wholesale and roasting for someone else, I think first and foremost, writing your mission statement and letting it be your guide is like the number one critical piece. And the reason why I start with that is because when things get tricky and you're presented with an opportunity, for example, to bring on a new client, and maybe it's a financially rewarding opportunity, but it's not in line with your mission statement, it allows you to say no, or no thank you, because you're staying close to your core values of why you're doing what you're doing. I think it's really easy to skip this step and just get really excited about, growing your business and working with new people. But I've found more times than not, organizations that don't have a mission statement and one that they come back to every 6 months and see kind of as a living statement, those people end up in trickier situations, saying yes to people or yes to opportunities that they then regret. So I think mission statement is step number one.
The question I have as you say that is, so you're presented with a client that is lucrative, let's say, like you were mentioning, but it's not the right fit for the values. But I can sense that there might be this idea of, well, money is money and we need money to operate. Sure. And maybe when we start making more money, we can start we can start saying no when we get more cash flow. I mean, what would you say to somebody who's just like, look, if it's green, I don't care. I can't be picky.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people that do take kind of the low hanging fruit in the beginning, because they're trying to grow their business and they need that cash. I've just observed more times than not that it ends up kind of biting them in the rear. I think, at some point you got to meet people where they are. And you've got to be able to kind of work with somebody as they grow. But if it's not going to be, if the future customer is not going to represent your brand in a way that you feel proud of, then I think it's worth reconsidering. I think if it's okay to mention, I think one of, role models for me in this industry is Baratza. As an organization, they would be described as a white road company, meaning that you have some companies that are red road companies, meaning that the bottom line is the number one motivation for them, and what dictates their decisions. And then you have white road companies that growth for growth's sake is not what motivates them. They're looking beyond the numbers, and they're really trying to make choices that are in line with their company's mission and values. So I think maybe that might not be a super direct answer to your question, but it's just been my experience that I think those that understand why they do what they do, it allows them to say no. And sometimes they think saying no actually does in the end save you money and time and resources. And it allows you to kind of partner with people that you really enjoy working with.
And we're talking about potentially like hard to work with people that you said yes to, and it becomes a pain in the neck to have to deal with them, day in and day out. Is that kind of what you're getting at with making those types of money but not value decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. I worked for a company in Asheville, North Carolina called Mountain Air, and Marshall Hance was just an incredible mentor to me. And one of the things he taught me that I won't ever forget about wholesale and partnerships is, a good partnership is someone you want to work with. And so to remember that, I think that kind of sets the bar in a place where when someone requires, extra resources or time or attention, it's easy to say yes, but if you feel like you're overextending yourself and your resources for somebody who doesn't quite get what you're doing or what you're about or upholding the same level of quality, then it ends up being a drain, Yeah.
You'll probably lose them in the long run anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I think it's sort of inevitable, I think that when you're working with people that you really want to partner with, it makes it a lot easier.
Cool. Well, it sounds like a good first step, getting that mission and those values down and choosing to live by them when it comes down to the most nerve-wracking part, and that's the cash flow. But what would be the second thing?
I think the second step for me is about building your dream team and getting better together. I really have learned over the last couple years how important it is to approach sales and wholesale growth as a team rather than as individual contributors. There's a book that Shane Snow actually wrote most recently called Dream Teams, Working Together Without Falling Apart. And I think it had a huge impact on me and how I approached my sales team, as well as my trainers and events and marketing team. I feel like if you have the people in the right seat that can help you fulfill your promise to your customers, then you're going to be in a good spot.
So I guess the next question would be, how do you go about doing that? And even if it's just one person, I imagine, on your team, it still applies that you have to have some kind of outline for what it is you're looking for in a wholesale team member. Are there things that you think are kind of universal things to look for?
Yeah, I think for me, a few things come to mind whenever I'm interviewing someone to come on our wholesale team. I'm definitely looking, number one is integrity. I think that more than anything is critical in having a team that's going to be successful. I think the second thing I look for is work ethic, meaning how hard are they willing to put their work forward and put their back into it? Are they disciplined? Do they show a genuine interest in kind of becoming a master of their work? And I think the third thing I look for is skills. It may be that they don't come from a coffee industry background, but if they have the people skills and the communication skills and sort of those executive functioning skills and are eager to learn about coffee, then it's usually a really good match. I'm constantly looking for people who aren't like me, who don't dress like me or talk like me or are from where I'm from. So really being intentional to hire a diverse team is super important. And I think really understanding too each person on your team and what motivates them and what they feel are their strengths and how to maximize those strengths in the right role. So, for example, if somebody's super eager and excited about coffee education and training, then the sales piece might be a little bit intimidating. But I think helping them use their skill sets as a trainer to wholesale customers, but also showing them that they're already doing sales. And part of what that looks like is providing that support and delivering on that promise to your customers. And it sort of demystifies the whole, sales piece of it. And it's really about how can you solve for solutions? What can you do to be observant, to see where the needs are and where the holes are, and to help fill them.
Interesting. So what I don't hear you saying is I look for good salespeople.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, which may be a shock. I think the best salespeople I know are really the people that are passionate about helping other people. It's not necessarily a requirement that they're motivated by financial gain. It may be that they operate best from that helper role and being able to help others thrive. I think that's part of the puzzle with wholesale. I've met several salespeople in the industry working for larger companies and the companies I've had the opportunity to work for. And it gets tricky, I think, when you're out there on your own trying to do, cold calling and set up, meetings with clients that are already completely happy with who they're working for and who they're working with. Yeah. So for me, it's really about allowing a sort of, especially coffee industry is made up of so many creative people, right? And we're a lot of people, or we enjoy working largely because of the relationships and the community that the industry affords. But I think it's also about learning how to create pathways forward outside of retail. And wholesale is one of those great opportunities where you can kind of carve out some room for somebody who has some management experience, who has some training experience, who has coffee experience perhaps, and really kind of develop some of those business skills. So yeah, the people I'm looking for on my team, not necessarily salespeople.
Right. But the pressure for sales would demand that somebody have integrity, because that pressure can be tempting to try to cut corners, to try to promise more than you can deliver just to make the sale.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's something, I'm glad you brought it back to integrity, because I think that's one thing that has been such a pillar of support on my teams is when it is easy to sell the equipment, perhaps that is a little bit too big for the customer's needs, or to cut a corner. It's an absolute, how do I say this? It's a non-option, you're really letting your sort of moral compass dictate the culture and decision makings of your team.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I think a lot of wholesale accounts can sniff out somebody who is genuine and who is genuinely likable, and especially because of what they do for a living. They work with the public and they train their staff to be kind and service focused and all of those things. So if your wholesale reps are the favorite person of their potential clients, they might even be willing to pay more just because they too are kind of catching that hey, I want to work with this person and these people because they're great people.
Yeah. And that kind of, not to get us too far off topic, but it really does kind of bring me back to this idea of like not having a personality-led company or department. There are for sure amazing people that I've been able to work with that are just irreplaceable. But I think if you're looking like long term, I think it's really important to start to think about creating systems and processes and an infrastructure that isn't personality driven. That's, anyone can come in and fill that slot and the wheels keep turning, and that's hard to do when there's so many dynamic, wonderful people in our industry, right? Because it speaks to the other side of that experience as a customer, where it's like, they're buying coffee from Chris or from Sarah. It gets even more personal. So, yeah. And I'm not sure how we got off that topic.
Well, it sounds like a dream team to me. I think we were talking about having your dream team after having that mission statement. And of course, everyone would line up with that mission statement who you hire. And so you got all these great people together with all of this integrity. And now what? What's the next step, like number 3 in your list of 5 things that we really need to do for wholesale?
Yeah, I would say determine what your promise is to your customers, and understand that human-to-human sales component. I think I've watched a lot of companies overextend themselves because they're not quite sure what they're providing their wholesale customers. So, for example, if you're going to decide that you want to be able to sell equipment, to your future partners, are you also going to service that equipment, or are you going to work with a service provider that's in, local? Are you going to, provide support in barista training or additional continued coffee education classes? Is that going to happen on site, or is it going to happen in a training lab of yours? So I think it's really important to understand what it is that you're promising to your customers so that you can deliver on it. And I think a wonderful book out there that I've read that helped me understand that more intimately, I already referenced it, was Joey Coleman's Never Lose a Customer Again. And I think the more you understand why you're getting into wholesale and what your capacity is, then it's going to be easy for you to feel successful in your commitment to your partners.
I love all these book references, by the way, just as an aside. That's really awesome. I have a follow-up question to this, and that's, going into this, no doubt it's going to be a stretch for you as an entrepreneur and your team. How do you distinguish between what's stretching and what's unreasonable in terms of, it's hard. Maybe it's not, you don't want to be like, well, if it's hard, we're not going to do it. Yeah.
I think what I think about in addition to that is it sustainable? Because I think that is really the missing piece. Because without a doubt, even with customers that really feel like a match and it's a mutually beneficial relationship, there are going to be days where, you're waking up at 5 a.m. to, load up your car with, a mobile espresso cart to go do this event for maybe 30 people. And it's going to be half a day's work. And you got to feel really close to that line of, can I do this once a week, or can I offer this once a quarter? And so I think the question is really, is this sustainable for us? And if it's not, if the answer is no, then I think you're at another place of deciding, well, if this is something that's really in line with your mission and your values, then where do we need to, potentially promote someone internally and so that it is sustainable, or where do we need to hire, more support from the outside? It kind of, again, it allows you to sort of be in the driver's seat rather than feel so reactive. It's more of the proactive place.
I like that in that proactive place. Also preemptive, because, this is something that you have to plan out. I mean, what you're describing is a process of asking questions, and it seems like in a particular situations, it might not be on the mind of the individual to actually take the time to go through all these personal, searching questions of their business and of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really why I would prioritize being really close and clear to your mission, and what it is that you want to do and how you want to be effective, within your own company. And then if you're going to choose to get into that wholesale world, really know how you can do that and do it really well.
Awesome. What's the next step here?
Yeah, I would say after you figure out what your promise is to your customers, it's setting up the wholesale program based on that promise. So for a lot of people, it's setting pricing. Are you going to ship, deliver? Are you going to offer training? Are you going to, like I mentioned, lease or sell equipment? Are you going to service the equipment? What kind of support are you going to provide events-wise? What kind of marketing support? It's basically the operations and the logistics. And that, to me, I learned the importance of really as I worked for larger companies that had been around for a long time, but were really more like a startup because they just kind of grew and grew and grew without sort of that reflecting on what was working and what wasn't working. There's also another great book that I read called The Advantage that is all about organizational health. And so I think if you can kind of keep that in mind while you're setting up your wholesale program based on your promise to your customers, then I think you're going to set yourself up for success.
Is there a danger of over-organizing yourself and not letting it grow organically? Or asked a different way, I guess, I'm the customer or I'm the listener, we just want to grow organically and you don't want to necessarily tighten our grip around any one thing and keep an open hand and things like that.
So organic growth, for me, it's been my experience that it's really some of the most authentic path forward for a coffee company. And I think the only challenge with letting a company just kind of evolve and grow organically is that if there's not the accountability, or if there's not that constant sort of reflecting back on the operations piece, or how are we going to do this sustainably, I think you can kind of get yourself into a corner. So yeah, I think, I don't know if there is a detriment to being super organized, but I think, again, if the closer you are to, again, that promise to your customers, it's going to, I think, help your team really know how to deliver on that, and to be successful.
You mentioned earlier in terms of your mission that you come back to it every 6 months and make it a living document. Would you say the same thing for your organizational structures in your business and your wholesale?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a wonderful mentor kind of model to me every 6 months and every year we would sort of do a download of operations and of each department, kind of take a second look and see, what's been working and what needs to shift in order to support the growth, or where do we need to backtrack and kind of rethink some things. I think that's sort of the beauty of having a mission statement, or a vision statement. It's super important, I think, to sort of take advantage every year of kind of recreating yourself, not entirely from the ground up, but really kind of taking that introspective look, and really understanding deeply sort of what is allowing you to feel successful, and your team to feel successful, and then where is there room to evolve and be nimble and to kind of reset.
I think that's really insightful, because we do, I think, get to this point where we have a good thing going for us. For example, my audio setup with my podcast, I have a very much a similar setup that I had 2 years ago, because I'm not, I want to say scared, but it's probably time that I redo it a little bit. And I know I need to but I'm really happy with it. But it could be better. But I'm afraid to take that next step to move out of my comfort zone. And I suppose that would kind of develop, that fear of change would develop if you don't make it a habit from the beginning.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think it's so funny you mentioned change, because it can feel so scary. And yet once you're, on the other side of it, it's like, how did I even, lead a podcast on this old equipment, or, if you think about it on behalf of your team, if they don't have the tools they need, whether it's internal CRMs or, spec sheets on equipment, or if they don't have the tools out in the field to feel effective and successful in their roles, then it is kind of a disservice. And so I've always really appreciated sort of that, mid-year and end of year pause, to really know how you can be supporting your team.
Well, I want to double down on that a little bit, and before we get to this last step, and ask specifically, like, I have a blank piece of paper in front of me, and I want to do what Sarah says, right? What buckets do I have to have? What are the sections that are essential for this program? I mean, you were talking about tools and the CRM software, and what are the things that we need to be putting into this organized system?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I found that you can go pretty far on some of, the basics. For example, like if you're wanting to, whether it's a team of, a small team or a large team, having, the benchmarks, your sales benchmarks per quarter. So break it down first, second, third, and fourth quarter, and revisit that mid-year. And to stay really current with each person on your team about how they're feeling successful and why. So for example, it's in the last few years, I've been able to kind of create sort of a wholesale program for companies that have been around for several years. They've been kind of fortunate in the sense where interest has come to them. So it's a lot of inbound sales, but really knowing how to equip your team with the communication assets that they need to have those conversations out in the field is really important. So, for example, having a price sheet being able to have a way of kind of tracking your pipeline. So for a long time, we used, free services such as Streak. And, not everyone has the ability financially to, use Salesforce or a larger CRM that really does, it's an investment. Mm-hmm. But I think if you're able to provide some simple tools that allow each person on your team to feel like they can monitor their progress, then that's going to be super helpful. It's interesting, technology is, makes things a lot easier in some ways, but there's usually like a hurdle you have to jump over in order to get there. So, for a lot of years, I worked for roasters where everything was analog. We wrote our rate of rise, every 15 seconds by hand. Yeah. And, it wasn't until recently that we switched over to Cropster. So, I think, to answer your question, it really, I think, depends on, what it is that is making up your wholesale program. So, for example, if you do decide that you want to sell equipment, to your customers, then like making sure that your team has the right exposure to knowing how to install equipment, whether it's a class or whether it's, them being able to, work with a third party. It's just really important, I think, to give the tools necessary to each person on your team based on what it is you're asking them to do.
I imagine you would also need to listen to what they say they need as well, because you probably won't think about everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's one of the best insights, truly. One of the mentors that I've had along the way, he really modeled to me sort of this 2-part question, which is, looped into a greeting, which is, hi, how are you? And the second thing he would say to me is, how can I help you today? Mm-hmm. And so I think you really hit the nail on the head when it's about asking what they need to be successful.
Yeah, it's almost like they're your wholesale client if they're your salespeople.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, what is the last step here for us in setting up a good wholesale program?
Yeah, I think you just got to launch and you got to learn. So there's a great book by Carol Dweck called The Growth Mindset, which I'm not sure if you've read. It was a really big aha moment for me when I finished that book, because I realized I had spent a lot of my young adulthood sort of operating from a fixed mindset. And I really wanted to change that about myself and really understood the importance of sort of seeing myself and the people I worked with and the people in my community with openness. And I think that's part of this last step, is really just giving it a go and learning along the way and being really okay with not having all the answers, but being wide open to learning as you go.
Well, yeah, that's scary, but it's some kind of a relief as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've really found that, it's our clients that end up teaching us a lot in the end, based on, their dreams and visions and needs. And then we also learn by doing, so many of us, right? So it's great to read all these books, and it's also really wonderful to have that hands-on experience and to know for yourself. And I think wholesale programs, those that I feel like thrive the most are really again, they're anchored to why they do what they do, but they're also really nimble and kind of adopted that learner mindset. And it's a reason why they're so successful.
Yeah, I love that book. And it's also likely true that a lot of the cultures that we have in companies, you find in upper management sometimes it can get kind of broken as you go up, and you'd be surprised. But a lot of that might come from everybody kind of having that fixed mindset, and it kind of breaks the culture a little bit.
Yeah.
And by having that growth mindset, it seems like you're setting yourself and all the people you bring on your team up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really empowering your team to be the leaders they already are, right? And giving them the benefit of the doubt, and, not underestimating somebody's ability. I mean, those are sort of basic, kindnesses that you can extend day to day, and definitely model from the inside out. And I think that's really important. No matter what, it doesn't matter, which role you're filling, or if it's at home or in the world, in the workforce. I think really, if there's any book that I could recommend your readers really picking up and doing a deep dive into, it's that growth mindset. I think it really did kind of help change my perspective on how I spent my time at work, and certainly how I show up as a wife and a mother and a daughter and a neighbor and all the other roles that I fill. So it's a good one.
Nice. Well, this has been hugely helpful and insightful, informative, and just a sweet time hearing your values displayed so clearly, and your passion for relationships and the cultures of teams. It's just really been exciting to hear. And I would wish that, every wholesale team would be as you describe it in these terms. It would make specialty coffee so much stronger and so much better. And it helps build retail even more. That final link in the chain needs to be bolstered. That's what this show is all about. And you've been busy doing it for all of these years. I really appreciate your articulating all this for us. What would your final advice to us be in terms of leadership and leading teams and developing these wholesale programs in our shops?
Yeah. Wow. Final advice is such a good question. I look back over the last 15 years, and there were times where I had mentors that really helped me along. And so I guess my advice would be to find a mentor and also be a mentor. I think, not to have that be so ambiguous. What does that actually look like? I think it's really, seeking out people that are ahead of where you are and where you would like to be, and really asking for some wisdom and support, and also finding ways that you can help share what you're learning. And I applying that to wholesale. I've worked with small teams and large teams, and I think one of the most rewarding parts of, being in a position where you're kind of supporting retail ops, you're also supporting other small businesses and fulfilling their dreams. It really does kind of create this complete full circle when you're able to seek the support you need, and also find yourself helping those that are just coming up along right behind you. And so, yeah, I think that's been something I feel really lucky and fortunate to have had, strictly from owners and operators that I've worked for, but also, other industry professionals that are outside of the retail game, but are maybe providing different services. I think what it is for me is that no matter who you work for, like, company culture is so important. And I think if you're putting your employees first, which may feel contradictory to what we've been told, which is to put the customer first. I feel like if you understand that supporting your people will allow them to, put forth their best work when they feel supported, when they feel valued, when they feel like they have what they need to be effective in their jobs, then I think it's a win for everybody. And I think that there's a little bit of that company culture and like understanding that's really shifting. It certainly is in the Bay Area, where we are surrounded by several tech companies where, employees are definitely, they don't lack for anything, right? But I think it goes beyond just like ping pong tables and free lunch. It's it's really about like seeing your team and seeing them as individuals and taking the time to know them and to know how to motivate them and how to support them. And I think that's one thing that really, for me in the past, has been super effective. When I accepted that I couldn't do it all on my own and I needed to solicit everyone on our team. And there's this leadership model called intent-based leadership, which really does empower everyone around you to be a leader. So rather than coming with questions of, can I do this? It's, I intend to do this. And the default answer is yes. Unless I have information that they don't have, in which case I redirect. But I really feel like it's super important to think of alternative ways of, managing your team so that they feel empowered to make great decisions, with your guidance, but also really allowing them to use their own ideas and, encourages everyone to bring their brain in the room and to not leave it at the door. It creates a really safe learning environment, which I think is also really important. And it gives everybody a voice in the room, and no idea is a bad idea. So I think those are some key points that come to mind when I think about the success of any department or any company or organization, is really having strong leadership from the top down, and communication that goes across and up and down. And that's touching on more organizational health, but I think the two go hand in hand.
That's absolutely true, in terms of the culture and how people feel. If you have a team that is taken care of the way you were just describing, you could do anything. It doesn't matter if it's wholesale or you'll be successful. That team will be successful doing whatever it sets its mind to. And so I love that you brought it to mentorship and caring for your people, because I think my mind would go to, like, if I was in that situation of setting up a program, like, I have to do all these things and I have to care for the program. I have to care for the spreadsheets, and that's where my best energy is going. But diverting that attention to delegation, empowerment, and coaching, and caring for people, and being a mentor to them, to bring it back to the mentorship thing, is really, really great. So thank you for sharing that. It was powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been so fun being on your show. Can we do this again next week?
Hey, why not? Well, let's try it. This was really great. And I appreciate you coming on and spending so much time actually being our mentor here today. So thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been a true pleasure And I thank you, Chris, for the opportunity. So be well. Thank you.
Well, like I said before, it's such an honor to have had Sarah on the show, somebody with such a wealth of knowledge and experience, freely sharing the tips and steps it takes to set up a great wholesale program. It was just really great. Equally great, I think, is being taught the importance of integrity and servant leadership. It is such a great thing to mix both the practical advice with inspirational, and I think Sarah did just a fantastic job not only equipping us, but encouraging us and challenging us to become better professionals and better leaders for the sake of our teams and ourselves as well. So thank you so much, Sarah, for spending time with us and being our mentor and helping us become better as professionals and be successful in wholesale. So, of course, if you want the show notes for this episode, you can go to keystotheshop.com. On the website, there's a place to put your email address. And when you sign up, you will find that you get those show notes delivered to your inbox on a bi-weekly basis. In the show notes are basically the key takeaways from each conversation or each episode. You'll also have the ability to download the transcripts from each episode. You'll also get some news about Keys to the Shop, things going on with consulting or events like Coffee Fest and speaking engagements coming up that you'll definitely want to attend if you can, and some links that I like to include in each newsletter that are just good professional development links I come across over the course of just surfing the internet for great resources. So keystotheshop.com, put your email address in the sidebar when you're on the homepage, and away you go. So if you want to reach out to me, you can email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. I always look forward to hearing from you if you have feedback, if you've got any questions or comments about the show or anything else. If you want to reach out about consulting, you can use that email as well. I want to remind everybody that Coffee Fest New York is coming up soon, and just go to coffeefest.com. I would love to see a lot of you in Coffee Fest. I'll be giving a couple of new talks. I'll discuss what those are in a later episode. But yeah, it's exciting times over at Coffee Fest. Thank you so much again for joining me. I wish you and your team in wholesale the best of success. Certainly, Sarah has set us up to do no less than succeed. Have an amazing week, and as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.